Fashion is something I've always been interested in.
All I can remember is when he was about 3 years old, he said that he wanted to be Ralph Lauren.
It was never a hobby or something I started and just threw away. It's always been around, always been there, always been important to me. When I first fell in love with it was probably right around 7th grade. That was when I became really interested. Like, I wanted to look at fashion shows on TV, read about it in magazines. It was the first time I went to New York, first time I bought a Vogue. My July '96 Vogue with Amber Valletta on the cover. Certain images just sort of started to change things, but it wasn't really till I moved to Pittsburgh after my 8th grade year, and I had the chance and the avenues to pursue fashion further. My sophomore year of high school, we had a project. Nobody in my group wanted to do it, but I really pushed fashion design. But what ended up happening was I just ended up going to the thrift store and bringing home garbage bags of clothes, and we'd rip them up, make them into new things, or we'd use curtains, and we used garbage bags. We used old pantyhose we cut the crotch out of to have like sheer arms, sort of shirts, and then the control top sort of became the bodice part. And it sort of took off from there. The methods that I used to try and go about creating clothes with no sewing experience and no clothing construction experience, really, it was more like, how do I make my vision a reality with limited sources, limited money, and almost no capability. All seams were glued. I mean, when we did the garbage bag dresses, they were stapled. I mean, things were frail and falling apart, but it was always kind of fun and stressful. I was just surprised, I guess, that many people had turned out, and it was sort of an overwhelming sort of sense of support from your friends. I was sort of nervous about putting it out in the high school at first, about would people be accepting to this, how would it go over. I think that there is a stereotype that goes along with most male fashion designers, and I think that played a little bit of a part in high school, especially a guy trying to do fashion shows. I mean, I fit every general stereotype, more or less. So it was sort of like overcoming that with myself and being comfortable enough with myself to put this out and be like, I don't really give a shit what you think. So it was always important to me to convey symbolism, to convey theater, but not literal theater, and to convey a message, an image, just showing people a cohesive package of something they never thought about before. The theme of my second show was called like a spiritual walk into the new millennium, something chintzy that shouldn't have been done. But what ended up happening was that was my sophomore year. At the end of my sophomore year, towards the beginning of my sophomore year, we found out my mom had cancer, and it was just sort of, the clothes naturally sort of progressed. The opening of the show was a funeral. I wanted to show the contrast between a funeral and a wedding. As I was saying, pulling from two opposite lands, you have white and you have black, funeral, wedding, and then the feeling of being depressed with the feeling of being rejuvenated.
If you know Jay at all, you know that he's a crazy person to begin with.
I always liked to take on a lot.
In one word, Jay is just a complete spaz.
So, I mean, I'm continually reading, going to the library.
He was really good with deadlines, and he would sort of like wait, and then all of a sudden, boom, and he would work nonstop for like a week.
I've always put a lot of stress on myself, and when I'm not stressed, I feel uncomfortable. I never had to really run by people what I was doing. They sort of just trusted me. So I sort of abused that a little bit, I think.
You had no idea what you were gonna wear, and he pulls something out and you go, is that a shirt? Is it a dress? What is that?
Starting off doing backless shirts as being controversial, then moving all the way to senior collection and doing mini skirts and low cut clothing where people were literally taped in dresses. And even as the theme sort of progressed and construction progressed, what I could get away with progressed. My final show, I knew I wanted it black. I knew I wanted a black, solid color, totally monochromatic show as my final show, just with all of the dealings of black, of the saturation, of the darkness, of sort of that end sort of quality. I want it to be a very singular, unified statement. I mean, everybody looks good in black. And I just started to accumulate my black fabrics. I started compiling right around the time when I was doing my dark into light show, and I was like, I'm really going to stretch this black theme to the end. And the show was called Finality, and it was just sort of the end of my career in high school, saying goodbye. But then they stomped on it was like a giant Motherwell painting is what I wanted to try and create, with 3 parallel runways. And they sort of walked in a U formation, and then at the end is when that middle runway was utilized. So the only thing that was white in the whole show was the runway that people walked on. When I wake up, I think about fashion. When I go to bed, I think about fashion. I think about it all the time. It's everything to me. When you're walking in stilettos down a wood floor or something, the sound that shoe makes on that floor is priceless.